welcoming arm, the glint of a clubbing gun. Too late, Ingram's hands flew up as the barrel of the gun made contact and his scalp ruptured in a 2-inch gash. A detonation behind his eyeballs blinded him. Blood burst from his head and spurted down the side of his face. His lungs collapsed, throwing out an animal gasp. The blow reduced him to a mindless mass, but the will to survive was strong. Ingram did the impossible. He remained on his feet, reeling away from his attacker. Clawing at the air for support, he staggered across the room, bumping into one piece of furniture after another. A battering ram struck him from behind and sent him crashing to the floor. Ingram's hands fluttered. "Nine! Nine!" He felt the impact of the gun barrel against his jaw. Dimly, he heard a bone break. Further shock had no time to reach him. He was enfolded in a soft blackness. Pete Mascari spotted a break and squeezed his cab into the traffic on 52nd Street. A pedestrian, racing the traffic light, sprang out of the way, and a cop screamed a warning with his whistle. Pete meekly braked. The cop shouted, "Get that hack out of here!" Pete grinned and stepped on the gas. If he had ignored the whistle, the cop would have taken his license number, and there would have been a ticket to pay, maybe a trip to traffic court. His grin became a smile as he glanced at his rearview mirror. He had picked up the young couple at Kennedy, a pretty blonde girl and a clean-cut young man who looked a little like Pete's oldest boy, the one in the Navy. The girl's corsage was wilted after the plane ride, but the shine in her eyes was still bright. They were holding hands. Pete thought of Bertrina in her kitchen and the shine in her eyes when he came home. Just ahead loomed the green canopy with the white lettering that spelled Hotel International. Pete cut toward the curb. An impulse to share in the happiness of the young honeymooners made him feel warm. "I won't take the tip," he decided. He let the cab creep forward toward the doorman. Something struck the hood of the cab. It made a sound like no sound Pete had heard since Korea. The taxi shuddered under the impact. Glass sprayed from the windshield, and some structure of flesh and bone came flying through. It showered the interior of the cab with blood and bits of tissue. Fingers dangled from the remains of a human arm, dripping onto the seat beside him. In that fractured instant, when none of it could be happening, Pete saw that there was a face, also. Not a face, actually, but what had once been a face. One side had been smashed in, an eye stuck to the cobwebbed windshield. Beyond the face was a mess of broken body. It lay in the well it had made in the hood of the cab. Pete did not know he was out of the cab until he tripped and fell. He got to his knees, feeling the curb against his toes. Then he was knocked over by a rush of fleeing people. A woman's heel slashed the back of his hand. He yelped in pain, scrambled to one side, banged against a standard, grabbed it, pulled himself to his feet. He discovered that he was across the street from his taxi. People seemed to be running in all directions. There was a great deal of meaningless shouting. A woman had fainted in the middle of the street. A car had swerved, run into another, and had itself been hit in the rear. Through the chaos cut the thin cry of a siren. Pete forced himself to look again toward his cab. He wondered if one of the screaming voices had been the young bride's. First stop on her honeymoon, and somebody jumps out of a hotel window. He was sick all over the sidewalk. Inspector Macelin, ramrod of the main office squad, was having a brought-in breakfast of ham and eggs when Captain Tim Corrigan entered his office. Macelin was in his 60s. He looked 45. He always struck Corrigan as ageless. The inspector raised his fork from the tray in a small salute. "How are tricks, Inspector?" Corrigan said. "As usual," Macelin grumbled. "Cold eggs and cold ham. About as tasty as the inside of an abandoned refrigerator. Sit down, Tim. Have some of my coffee?" "No thanks, Inspector. I like my coffee without wax." "So do I, but I never get it."